Hello everybody, welcome back. I was not really planning on doing more videos. We are only a couple of days from the premiere, but Ish is going down in a few days before the Daryl Dixon premiere. And I'm getting inundated with messages and inbox asks and all of that, which is fine. I kind of expect this sort of thing. There's always a bit of a barrage right before the show returns. Especially the ones that involve Daryl. We don't get quite as much of it before things like Fear or even The Ones Who Live wasn't quite as bad, but you know, it's Daryl, it's Bethyl, I get it. So I'm gonna mostly go off the inbox because I think things people are asking is pretty well covering everything that's happened. So let's start with the most obvious one, which is that there were some leaked spoilers just the other day that Daryl and Isabelle are going to kiss. Now, first of all, let me say that I'm not 100% sure that this is confirmed. It's something that, from what I understand, it came out in the Carol fandom, and, you know, don't get me wrong, a lot of the spoilers they get end up being true, so I'm not saying it isn't true, but I also don't know what the source is, so just take it with a grain of salt. It may not even be true. But if it is, let's go ahead and just assume that it is, because I would rather assume that it is and everyone make their peace with it than like be shocked by it and all of that. So here's the thing, guys. The last few weeks I have started to hear, I don't want to say I've heard things like this. I have not heard this before yesterday when the spoiler leaked, but or, you know, assuming it is a real spoiler. But more and more, I felt like people were leaning toward, in what they were saying about the show, possible romance between Daryl and Isabelle. For one thing, we heard, and I think I talked about this in another video, that, you know, she actually might change the way she sees Daryl and, you know, get to the point where he's the only one she trusts, which could or could not be romantic, but I can see that maybe that was a hint that her attitude and feelings toward Daryl will change, because honestly, it really seems to me like it was her shutting it down more than him. I will go back to what I said after the finale of season 1, which was that she asked him to stay and he would not. But it's also a matter of, he kind of was hinting around, like almost like subtly asking if she was interested in a relationship, and she always shut it down. She always turned away. And so it's like, if they had been in a relationship, he totally would have stayed for her, but she didn't want that, so he was leaving. And that's totally understandable, right? And then he came back because of Laurent, not because of her. But we've also said constantly since season 1 aired that Daryl is clearly looking for companionship. So if she changes her mind and says, okay, well, maybe I am interested in a relationship, then he would probably be open to that. But you know, try not to freak out about this. I know everybody's freaking out about it. I've seen, believe me, I've seen. But it doesn't freak me out all that much, mostly because we know that she's gonna die. Unfortunately. And I like Isabelle. Like, I'm not even that happy that she's dying. It's really sad. But at the same time, that fact, it makes it so that I don't freak out about this, because we know she's not going to be his long-term love interest, and a kiss doesn't sound like it's going to be very much before she unfortunately passes away. Now, one of the things that was sent to me was a caroler who was ranting about this, right? And they actually said something really, really interesting. They were doing their typical rant about how they hated this, and it should be Carol and Daryl, not Carol and Isabelle, and, you know, pretty typical stuff from their ship. But she was saying, too, that she felt like they were just repeating a pattern, that they were going to use this woman's death, Isabelle, as, you know, man pain for Daryl. And if you've ever read any of their stuff, you know that they rant about that a lot. And then they said something interesting. This was a Carol account, and they said, it feels like they're doing Beth's death all over again. That was super interesting. Number one, it shows that even though they deny it, that's kind of admitting that maybe Daryl had feelings for Beth and they know it. I mean, I'm sure that's probably not what they meant to say, but if Daryl and Isabelle are going to kiss and then she's going to die, that's a caroler account comparing that to Beth. So I thought that was super interesting, that they were kind of admitting things I don't think they meant to admit there. But more than that, I almost got to say that I kind of agree with them on this. Like, they were being negative and nasty about it and saying that, you know, Isabelle's character was just created to give Daryl pain. And like I said, I actually maybe kind of agree with that. Not in the nasty way that they are going on about, but we all know, I mean, you guys, it's a fact. It's a known fact now that season 1 was not originally planned the way that it ended up being. And that is because Carol was supposed to be there. It was going to be Carol and Daryl. So, we know that Melissa McBride could not do season 1, so she wasn't able to figure everything out logistically and get on board the show until season 2. So they decided to move forward with season 1 and create a season 1 that was just around Norman and Daryl, right? But if that hadn't been the case, if Melissa had been able to do it right off and didn't have to push it by a year, I think season 2 would have been season 1. Season 1 was like an extra season that they did so that we didn't have to wait another year for the show to come out, which was a service to us, really. So with that being the case, they had to create some sort of stand-in, someone for Daryl to interact with. And I don't think Isabelle was ever meant to survive in the long run. I don't think it was ever planned that way. Now, we have talked about a lot of ways in which Isabelle is like Beth. We have the scars on her arm. I think that's probably the biggest one. Like almost in the same place that Beth had scars from trying to commit suicide, right? She also, I felt like Isabelle had a lot of Carol in her. And that made sense to me too, because, theoretically, if Carol is there, it's going to be Carol and Daryl who are the main characters who are interacting, and they needed a stand-in since Melissa wasn't there. So that became Isabelle. So I think Isabelle was kind of a mishmash of things. She was partly a stand-in for Carol, and in a lot of ways she was being used as a foreshadow of Beth. So just think about it this way. He's looking for companionship. He has a little bit of a thing with Isabelle, and then she dies. But I really think that this is 100% meant to foreshadow Beth showing up. You know what I mean? And that is why, number one, that's why she will die, Isabelle. And that's why they're doing this at all. They're sort of, and I said this before in season 1 too, I feel like they're sort of easing us into Daryl's romance phase. And obviously none of us really need to be eased, but other parts of the fandom and other ships definitely do. And not that the easing is going particularly well, but you know what I mean. They first introduced Leah several seasons ago, but even then they didn't have them kiss or anything. And I don't know if you guys remember this, in the Talking Dead after Find Me, I guess it would have been, one of the writers, I cannot remember her name, talked about how Lynn Collins was saying they couldn't kiss because COVID was going on. And then the writer jumped in and said, no, we probably wouldn't have had them kiss anyway, because we know how sensitive the fandom is to Daryl and his love life and all of that. Well, clearly this is them having him kiss someone. So it's not that that's gone out the window. It's just that they're easing us in. It will probably be not that big of a deal. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be sweet. And I don't want to say that the kiss will be like stupid or anything, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to get them making out all over the place or anything like that. You know what I mean? I think they're just easing us in. And that way, when the person who is going to be his long-term love interest, I wonder who that could be, right, shows up, we'll have already seen this, and people have already kind of acclimated to Daryl having a love interest. And again, I think this is really smart on the part of the writers and the showrunners, because they know that there's going to be a backlash. There already has been. And so they're kind of introducing it by degrees and dealing with the backlash in stages. And right now they're having a huge backlash from a certain ship, which I know you've all seen. And everybody's dealing with it, which I'll get into as we go through some more of your asks. But this way, let's put it this way. I almost feel like this is their way of protecting Beth and Daryl's romance, because they're almost like being preemptive about the backlash, right? Once people see Daryl with someone, once they see him kiss someone, and it also is going to make people want him to find someone all the more. There are so many people, I've talked about this before, who don't actually care who he ends up with, who aren't part of the shipping wars, who don't care if it's Carol, who don't care if it's Isabelle, who don't, they don't care who it is. They just want Daryl to find happiness. So we are once again going to have something where he came so close. That's what it's going to feel like. He came so close to finding happiness because he was kind of interested in Isabelle, and then she finally came around and seemed like she was open to it, and then she died. And everyone's going to be like, why does this keep happening to him, And I've said a million times, as soon as Beth shows up, it's going to be really obvious where they're going with it. It's not obvious to everyone right now because, excuse me, my voice is going. Not everyone thinks she's alive or anything, so they don't know where it's going. But most people, not the online shippers and trolls, but most other people in the fandom have said that they don't really want him with Carol because it's been too long and they're just really in the friend zone now, and people like their relationship the way that it is. I know that that's not true of the people who rant online. There's it's a very small but very noisy fandom who are angry about that. But the vast majority of the show's fans, I think if at any point they had decided that he was going to be with Carol, people would have been fine with that. They would have been like, okay, cool, as long as he has some happiness, like Rick and Michonne have, like Maggie and Glenn had. They just want him to find some happiness. So they didn't really care who it was with. But now, after so long, they don't really want it to be with Carol anymore. I think that's part of the reason so many people could get behind Connie, because it was a healthy relationship. It wasn't toxic the way he and Leah were. And again, they just want him to find happiness. So anyway, I just wanted to address the kiss. I want to say that if it does happen, I'm kind of assuming that it will. Like I said, that hasn't been, as far as I know, confirmed, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it will be the case. And if it's not, hey, so much the better. A lot of emotions about nothing, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that it will. But it doesn't freak me out. And what I'm going to be looking for more than anything is indications that this is a precursor to Beth, So, and we already have a lot of that. We have Isabelle's scars. We have the fact that she is faith, is a person of faith, as Beth was. We have a lot of stuff like that, And I do think, even though the connection between her and Daryl wasn't as instant or as deep, I don't think, as his and Beth's was back in season 4, at the same time, I do feel like they sort of built Daryl and Isabelle's relationship in a similar way, because they had to be friends and go through a lot of stuff together before anything like romance was ever even addressed, And in that way, it kind of mirrors Beth and Daryl's relationship from season 4. So, look, I know nobody's happy about this. If this does end up being the case, I'm not either. I wouldn't have wanted that. But it also doesn't sound like it's going to be a full-blown, like, Leah, where they're going to have sex and live together. It really sounds like, to me, like it's going to be a kiss, and then in the next episode she's going to die. So, I don't know for sure exactly how it will play out. We'll have to see. But I do know that people are freaking out. And again, we'll just have to wait and see if this is even true. But if it is, try not to let it mess with your head too much, because I think that I think there's a whole plan in place, and I'm just not that worried about it overall. Okay? All right, let's see, where are we at here? Yeah, let me answer one more. I try not to make these too long, and I can really get going after a while, which you guys know by now. All right, let's see. So this is in response to one of my other videos where I talked about the I nevers. Dude, get Daryl some frozen yogurt already, because with the singing in public happening, that's about the only thing left on the list, right? Way to go on calling that. Thank you. And yes, I did kind of address this, that it is really the only thing left on the list. So I'm kind of hoping that we'll actually see the frozen yogurt thing at some point in Daryl Dixon season 2. It'd be great if we saw them both, and I think they just purposely leaked the singing one, but that doesn't mean that we won't see the frozen yogurt one. So that's another thing we can be watching for, is for that to be fulfilled. So yeah, thank you. Anonymous says, why are carolers never happy? I could elaborate, but do I need to? Just like, why? I don't want to get too much into the weeds of this, because I could really get going on this too. And really what it comes down to, I think, is that I almost hate to say this because it's very negative. There are just some people online, and it's not just carolers by any stretch. There are people in the Bethyl fandom that are like this. There are people in every fandom that are like this. There are some people who just thrive on drama, and they just want what they want, and even if they got it, they would switch to something else to complain about. So I'm assuming, maybe this is a big assumption to make, but when the EW article came out, they actually talked a lot about how Melissa was given a lot of say in what happens this season, okay? Especially because it's the book of Carol, in Carol's arc. Now, I think that they knew where they wanted to go with it. I'm not saying she wrote the whole thing, but they gave her a lot of creative input on how it would look in the show and which parts of Carol's history and Carol's demons they were going to end up exploring, because they knew this was going to be about Carol's demons. And she's the one who said we should revisit Sophia, and was very much the one who came up with the idea to actually recreate the barn scene from season 2, which we know they're doing. Okay, so it's very similar to what we always hear about Norman having creative input about Daryl. Melissa has a lot of that same creative input about Carol, and that goes directly contrary to what the Carolers always say, that they are the show was run by a bunch of middle-aged white men who disrespect Melissa, and she doesn't get any say, and they bully her and walk all over her. No. This is proof, and honestly, I think they put this in the article to rebut that, because it's being said so much online that that is just not the case. She's very much invested and has a big creative say in her character, and that's a good thing. That shows that what they're saying about her and how the show treats her is just utterly untrue. So they really should be happy about that. They really should be relieved that they were mistaken about that, and that she is being given a lot of power and a lot of creative control over her character. That's a really good thing. I mean, good for her. Go Melissa. But instead, they're still pissed off. And it's probably because it's proving a lot of what they're saying wrong, and they don't like to be wrong. But again, it doesn't matter. No matter what, they're never going to be happy no matter what you give them. I honestly think even if Daryl and Carol did get together, they would still find something else to complain about. They would still complain about the way they got together, or they would complain about how now, even though they're together, Melissa doesn't have top billing in the show. I mean, there's always going to be something they complain about. So if you're looking for them to be happy, you're going to be really disappointed. I'll just leave it at that. And like I said, it's not just them. There are a lot of people, especially a lot of people online, who can get away with this behavior because of the anonymity of the internet. And it's just unfortunate, but that's why, for the most part, I just ignore them, because nothing I say or do is going to make it better. And, all they're going to do is bring you down. So anyway. All right. I'm going to call that for today, and I will be back tomorrow. I'm going to try to get through all of these asks before Sunday, when the premiere is actually on. And I'm super excited for the premiere, despite the rumors about the kiss. It's okay. I'm still excited for season 2, because, guys, you just got to look at Endgame. And overall, no matter what happens with Isabelle, she's not Endgame. Beth is. So don't worry about it. And yeah, maybe it'll be a little hard to watch. Maybe we'll be, muttering under our breaths and all of that. But that's okay. We can do that. And still be excited, because I still believe that Beth is coming. Okay? Be back soon.